today's video I want to talk a little bit about women's sexuality and more specifically, women's sexuality once women get into longer term relationships, how it's viewed in our society and what the true reality may be. And this is to sort of help you understand maybe a little bit, behind the scenes of what might be happening in your relationship. Now, I want to sort of preface this by saying it could potentially be different based on, because it's not always gendered. We can't just say like women are like this and men are like this. Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Like, it's not about that. But these concepts that I'm going to share may and it may help you, and they may also be true for men too, right? Like, we are still learning and studying so much about human sexuality and human nature. So I think it's important to just kind of look at all the different possibilities so that you can make heads or tails and learn to navigate your relationship in a way that feels more authentic, supported, realistic for you. So one of the things that common belief systems in our culture, one of the things that we often see, particularly in my office as a sex therapist, that I've seen over and over in the last 20 years, is people coming to my office and one person obviously is not feeling as their libido or their arousal is much lower than the other person. And quite often it's the women, though not always, right? Definitely had it the other way around, and definitely we're talking, we've worked with same-sex couples, partners that are trans and non-binary. So I want to just kind of like preface it by saying this is just a theory. I find it, as a cisgendered female myself, to be true. And in my work, I also find it to be true. The rhetoric is, the common sort of thread is that women are as sexual as their partners, as their male partners in relationships. And the truth of the matter actually is that, well, let me just back up. It's like this idea that women just aren't sexual or women's libidos are lower. And yes, there are a lot of factors that contribute to that. One of them is, of course, how women are socialized. Like, women are much less likely to masturbate, to explore their own bodies. Women are also much more likely to have shame around their bodies. Although in other videos, I will be talking about men and men's bodies and, men's body shame. But today I wanted to talk about women and women's bodies and how it relates to their sexuality. So that's certainly a factor. If you're a woman, and I see this a lot, there may be stories underlying around shame around sexuality. Women are often slut shamed, right? Or they're shamed for, you're supposed to look sexy but act prudish, right? There's this very much double standard when it comes to women. Women are expected to be sexual in a committed relationship only, right? If you're sexual outside of a committed relationship, there can be shunning. People might look at you weird. All sorts of social stigma that you all are obviously also very familiar with. And I want to pose another idea around women's sexuality. And I'm going to share this book with you. It's called Untrue by Wednesday Martin. I believe she is a sexual anthropologist. The subtitle is Why Nearly Everything We Believe About Women, Lust, and Infidelity is Untrue. And untrue is kind of a word that, often used to describe the unchaste woman, right? Well, historically, it seems, based on her studies, that women are actually more non-monogamous than men. And so if you go historical, and I'm not going to get too historical in this course and then in this video, but if you go historical, then it might give you a little bit of understanding, like monogamy. When did monogamy come into play in our society, in our culture? Wednesday Martin talks about the Industrial Revolution, farming. I often talk about the nuclear family. All of these structures over time have basically corralled us, right? Men and women both alike, into nuclear families, where there's a man and a woman and children, right? So there's two sort of heads of families. And historically, this is not necessarily what we evolved from, right? So when we start to look at that, that might explain why women's libido oftentimes wanes in long-term relationships. It's not the only explanation, but it is one that I talk about a lot, especially because I work with a lot of couples around maneuvering non-monogamy, and where my practice is based, in Los Angeles on the West Coast, and just on the West Coast in general, and in other parts of the country, it's becoming more and more popular, but non-monogamy is really, really popular. It's becoming this lifestyle that almost everybody is either dipping a toe in or exploring, like, full force. It's also not for everyone. So this program isn't necessarily about that, although I have several videos that are in the extras section for those who do want to explore a little bit of that. This is just one explanation as to why women tend to lose their libido in long-term relationships. And it may not even just be the women. It might be the men too. It might be people of all genders. Aside from the shameful messaging that we receive from a very young age, which I will talk about, this is another possible theory. There's another really great book. It's called Sex at Dawn. And I will link to all of these books in the resources section so that you have access to all the great resources. Sex at Dawn also talks about at length how, as humans, we may not have evolved to be monogamous. And so just keeping that in mind, that if this isn't necessarily our truest human expression, at least not where we came from, then there are going to be times where it feels harder to be intimate, to feel aroused, to be in that desire when you're in a long-term relationship. And that's coupled with all sorts of other stuff, like paying the bills, paying the mortgage, raising the kids, going to work. It's hard to multitask. Let's just put that out there. So all of this to say is that confinement could be a libido killer. Confinement in and of itself could be a libido killer. And one of the things that I encourage partners to do is to talk. Talk about attractions, talk about fantasies. Obviously trying to do it without shame, without laughter, without awkwardness. Laughter can be good if you're laughing together, like it's fun, but not laughing at the other person. Laughing with and together is different than laughing at. So, I think having more conversations, supporting each other so that these ideas and thoughts can be explored openly. A lot of times in relationships, partners will, it's not like they're not allowed to have an open conversation about it, right? They're not allowed to speak openly about other people that they're attracted to, or Maybe they'd be curious to try an open relationship. People feel scared and thwarted to even bring those conversations up a lot of times. So leaving a safe, open opportunity and space to do that may also provide a little bit of flexibility, fluidity. You know, I often find in my own personal relationships, when I can talk about something openly without being judged, with it being a possibility on the table, that alone creates so much peace, right? It almost brings this, like, if I'm accepted and respected for my thoughts and feelings, then I feel safe in this relationship and I'm not going anywhere, right? The other thing I want to talk about is one of the things that they talk about is, you know, this hunter kind of concept. And this, maybe I'll probably make another separate video about this, but, you know, we often chase people that are emotionally unavailable. And then there's all this, you know, information out there about how to stop chasing emotionally unavailable people. Oh, it's because you're dopamine. Oh, this, oh, that. Well, according to Wednesday Martin and Sex at Dawn, these were how we evolved, that women are actually natural hunters. So it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint and a biological standpoint that we would chase things that initially seem unattainable. And then once we attain them, we get bored of it, right? Or we continue to chase the emotionally unavailable person or people because that is what evolutionarily our biology really wants to do. It's our natural state. So if you're missing this in your relationship, if you're always feeling like you're ready for your partner and your partner's not really interested, it might be that they're not given the space to chase. A little bit of chasing can really bring that excitement back, bring that spark back. So I think the sort of like moral of the story is learning to let go, giving space, allowing your partner to be who they are, allowing your partner to miss you, getting involved in your own activities. And then when it comes to sexuality, being more open-minded, not so goal-oriented and let's focus on sex and let's get down to the business and active sex, because it's obviously so much more nuanced than that. So you want to lean in to a lot of that nuance, and that can be done by fostering more support, acceptance, and conversation.